Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this week. And today we're actually going to be discussing web applications from idea to ongoing support. And we wanted to bring up this subject in particular because there's a lot of gotchas, there's a lot of pitfalls that happen when people go, okay, I have an idea for an app. I want to start planning how I'm going to get that implemented. I want to tie it into my CRM, to Salesforce or what have you, or to other tools. There's a lot of things that need to be known, and some of them, without knowing them in advance and without asking the right questions, can land you in a lot of trouble. They can be very, very expensive. So we have discovered 7. There's probably more questions that you could ask, but 7 that you can use to start the conversation and to find out the things that you want to know. I'm joined today by Kane Hooper. Kane is, of course, the Chief Operating Officer of Reinteractive. He has a wealth of knowledge, having been in this industry for many, many years and seen, probably 300 clients, maybe more, Kane. Is that about right?
I think it'd be close to 300 clients, but I've personally run over 150 software projects now. So yeah, I've seen probably about anything and everything you're going to see in this space, I reckon.
Yeah, I would say that's probably about right. And the interesting thing is, even though the playing field of web application changes, like, there's things that change, as we add AI and automation and other tools like that into the whole process, these questions are going to remain the same. The things that you need to know as a buyer of these applications remain the same. Would you agree with that, Kane?
Well, yeah, the tech changes. I mean, and that's the thing with anything in software, the keeping up to date with what's happening technologically is a constant battle. But that's handled by good technical guys, good developers. When you're looking at it from a business decision perspective, I would say not a huge amount has changed in the last sort of 20 years of software development. I reckon it's been that in itself. There's those fairly consistent principles, the things that make software projects work and things that make it fail. I don't think they've changed a lot.
Right. And then you'll find developers who are good, and the ones that you find that are good are going to remain in that condition. And the ones that are bad, these are the ones you have to stay away from. No amount of added technology is going to turn them into good developers suddenly overnight.
No, add AI on top of a bad developer and you get AI slop like no one's business.
Yeah. Not necessarily one of the questions, but I'll just mention it at this point. If you have a very good developer, they can utilize AI tools to improve their productivity and improve their quality. And as you just said, Kane, if you've got a bad developer, it's just going to make a bad scene so much worse.
Yeah. Well, I know it's not the topic, but I've been seeing that recently with junior developers diving in on the AI side. And if you don't know how to guide the AI, and the AI just goes off and does its thing, then the number of disasters I'm seeing coming to light. I mean, it is almost one of these principles now, is an understanding of what is the actual technical capability and skill of your team that you're going to be working with, because their ability to understand, like if you take a user's password, how do you store that in the database? Now, if the person doing the work has no idea, the AI is not necessarily going to do it. And the answer is you've got to encrypt it. So that if someone hacks your database, the password stays secured. So there's definitely something to be said about that. But
and there's a million things like that you need to know.
Yeah.
So totally. When the AI outputs something, read it, understand it, make sure that's actually what you want. The same as if you were asked, say, ChatGPT to write an email for you. If you were to, Kane's camera may go off from time to time. If you were to ask ChatGPT to write you an email, of course, you would want to make sure that you would read through that email and make sure it's actually what you wanted to say before you sent it off to the person. You wouldn't send that email without looking at it, or you shouldn't. And it's the same with code. Let's get into the subject at hand.
Yeah.
The 7 questions, and there are 7, that you're going to use. So let's say you are a client and you want to have some application written that is going to do some work for you. So, you need some app development done. These are the questions you're going to ask at the front, at the start, before you decide on who you're going to use to write to be your application developer, before you decide who is going to be your partner for probably many years to come. There are some things that you're going to need to know. Here's the first one, and I'm going to put this one first because it's probably the most important. We're not going to do this backwards, so the most important is last. In fact, they've all got importance. The first one is to know that, and it's encoded in the title of this webinar, that you've got a large amount of what we call capital expenditure, CapEx, that sits at the front. So a large amount of development work needs to be done at the start, and that might be 20 weeks or 15 weeks or 10 weeks of development work that needs to be done to build your application. But following on from that, there's maintenance. Kane, what does the maintenance include?
So the maintenance is basically keeping the software tuned and staying up to date with security vulnerability, security risks. As the technology changes, you've got to keep the language that you're using. The software language goes through versions and it changes over time, generally to deal with security vulnerabilities and performance improvements. But you can't leave your application in an old version while these changes are going ahead. So it's the big difference between, say, off-the-shelf software. So take Salesforce, for example. That is primarily sort of that operating expense. There's ongoing costs. With custom software, there are those costs as well. The difference is it's usually skewed a lot differently, whereas, say, with Salesforce, there's a lot higher ongoing costs. With software development, custom software development, there's a higher initial cost, and then there is some, but a smaller ongoing cost. But primarily, it's making sure that this application that you've invested in, that this asset that you've put all of this capital into, maintains its value over time. So if you, for example, you may remember this one, Errol, we had a client who hadn't done any maintenance on their application for, I think it was about 8 or 9 years. And it was an e-commerce platform. It was their business. Their entire business was based on this site. And it got to the point where that application could almost no longer run on their operating system. So they're running on AWS, and the service had to be upgraded because of, again, security risks. And the operating system is just old. But the next version of the operating system would not run their software because the language hadn't been, it was like one of the first versions of Ruby at that time. And it was a nightmare to upgrade them to a sufficient level to get that actually application working. Now, if they'd left it another year, the application would have been dead and gone. Like their old servers would have been shut down and the app would have been offline, and they would have been offline for 6 months.
Right. Yeah. So it's incredibly important that you take into account ongoing maintenance. If you start work with a developer and you say to the developer, okay, how much do you think this app might cost? Now, they can't give you an exact figure at the start because they don't know exactly what you want, but they might say, it's in the ballpark 150 to 200,000, or it's in the ballpark of 80 to 120, or whatever their number might be. Let's say they can give you that ballpark. The next question is going to be, okay, how much is the ongoing maintenance? How much is the ongoing costs after you've built it? And they should be able to tell you, hey, it's going to cost you another $1,000, another $2,000, another $3,000 a month to make sure this application remains up to date, remains secure, that we can look after the infrastructure properly, that we can do all of the updates and upgrades that you need. And then if you want additional work done, this is how much it's going to cost on top of that. Like, you want a new feature built, or you want a new set of features built, this is how much that's going to cost you. And you'll have some understanding of what's the rate per week, or, something like that. So ask the question. If your developer says we don't look after that ongoing maintenance, probably stay away. It's probably not the developer that you should be.
That becomes a big problem, actually, because if you're building a custom software and you don't have technical resources, and so you're relying on the company to build it, which is fine. If they don't provide that ongoing support once the application is built, and there are companies that don't, then you're going to be stuck in a situation where you're going to now have to become a software development firm yourself, or you then have to find another company to look after the ongoing maintenance support. Yes, in an ideal world, the guys who build it just look after it for you, but that's not always the case. So we do, we see a bit of that. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah, Reinteractive, we absolutely look after that. All right. Next question that you're going to ask is, what other costs are involved? So we looked at the first and most expensive part of the budget, which is the application development, and then following on from that, the maintenance. There are other budgetary considerations you need to have. any piece of software has what we call third-party integration. So things that connect to it. It might be Salesforce, it might be Xero, it might be Stripe, it might be SendGrid. Like there's many of these types of applications that you will need to do particular pieces of work, and all of them cost some amount of money. That's called, these are part of your ongoing costs. So there's, monthly subscriptions that you'll have to have, logging, all of that sort of stuff. And I'm going to lump into this just because it needs to be said, marketing. Marketing means that once you've built the application, people aren't just going to start using it and paying you money for it, if that's the purpose of the application, of course. So you have to have marketing to bring people to your application so that they'll start using it and go, oh, this is amazing. Here's my $20 a month, or whatever you're going to do with it. What other things might fall under that umbrella, Kane, that I've forgotten?
Well, can I just talk about that marketing piece for a sec?
Sure.
We saw that relatively recently.
So
of course, it depends on the software you're building, whether it's an internal tool versus a external client. Something like a customer portal or means for clients to engage with your particular service. The old adage, if you build it, they will come, does not apply in the digital age. Like how many people have built things that no one comes to, and unfortunately, I've seen that a couple of times where, a client they know what they want to build and it's a good product, but they haven't fully considered how to actually get that out to market.
Right.
And if you don't have that side, I would go as far to say, don't start building until you know how you're going to take this thing to market. You could do a little prototype. You could build something very small and fast and cheap just to be able to show people and to demo. But if you don't know how to go to market, you're going to spend a lot of money building and then trying to work out how to get it. And maybe no one wants that product. Maybe there is no sufficient market for it.
Absolutely. No market for it. Yeah.
No, so that first phase of like what we do with our actual workshop, build a little prototype and then go out and start showing people, are people interested in it? Does it do something different than they couldn't already get from another product? And I think people look too much at the technical side and too much at the thing they're going to build and not consider the end user and how they're going to get it into their hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. The way we solve that is by building a prototype. But this as a question is not even one that you will ask your developer, because the developer isn't a marketer. The development company is not a marketing company. So they're not going to necessarily know that, except to say to you, hey, you need to find this out. One thing that I've learned over time is when clients come to us and say, I've got this great idea, everyone tells me it's a great idea, is to find out who's everybody. Everybody tends to be their mates, their mum, the people who are always going to tell you, oh, it's a great idea, it's a killer. So the actual way to tell, this is a really good way to tell. I mean, you can survey all of your potential users, absolutely. But if you really want to get something into the market, you build that prototype that Kane was just mentioning, something that is, a proof of concept, or, the UX, so you can see the designs and so on of how the thing hangs together. And you take that to someone who is going to give you some investment dollars. And if they give you some investment money and the person is a savvy, smart investor in tech, they'll know. And if they go, oh, this is a dumb idea, it possibly might be. So just, it's a way, it's not necessarily the best. It's just, that's a very practical real world solution to the problem. But engage a marketing firm, absolutely, or put someone on whose job it is to figure out how to do the social media and the ads and everything else that are needed. So just consider it. Yes, other third-party software it's not always super expensive, but does have to be thought of. Like if you want, say, an API, a connection to ChatGPT, for example, how much would that be? That sort of thing. But
the other thing to consider there is that it's not just that initial cost, and it's also the subscription. It'll take, OpenAI. You want to build an AI platform, and AI moves fast. The models are changing from one model to the next. You have to change the way you interact with it, because your prompt that you used with GPT-3 no longer gets the results on GPT-4, and the same on 5, and so on. So you also have to consider the ongoing development cost of those sorts of integrations. Or say if you take keeping them up to date. Or if you take something like Salesforce, for example, over time, they change their connections, their APIs, and they'll usually give lots of notice. And it's not like they just change it overnight. But over like a couple of years, they'll start shifting over, and you need to do the development to adjust with that. So you can't just build it and be done. You've got to build it, and then it's again maintenance, looking after all these connections, the security, and so on. It's like looking after any asset, like looking after a car. You've got to get it serviced every year. With software, it's a bit more regular. You just kind of got to get it serviced all the time.
Yeah. And look, all of these things too are consumption based. So you might start off small, but realize as you scale your product and you get the thousands of people using it, then the prices increase commensurately. So they go up, with the usage. So something to keep in mind as well, like, the $10 a month that you're spending at the start is not, what it's going to be later on. We're going to include in this point as well, the infrastructure, AWS or Heroku or Azure or whatever you're going to use. These can be very, very expensive, and not properly maintained and not properly cared for can be very, very expensive. So it falls under the maintenance question as well. All right. Next point we're going to bring up is how the developer is going to develop your application. Now, sometimes a developer might have a set of ready-made tools, libraries, if you like, of pre-written code, and that can save some time, and that's very, very helpful. Problems that have been solved before are often put into these libraries. And that means that I have to solve them again. So that's going to help you save some time. And any piece of custom software is going to utilize those. To the degree that they use them will determine, how good a developer they are and how cheap your product is going to be. So everything can be completely off the shelf and nothing customized at all, a la WordPress or something like that. Not the path that I would recommend, because you're trying to fit your concept of what is a good idea into someone else's pre-formatted box. But completely 100% custom isn't necessary either, because there are things that are already solved. What are some typical things that are already solved that these libraries might include, Kane?
I mean, if you just straight off the bat, things like login, so sign up and log in. The whole system of how that's managed behind the scenes is a very, very old solved problem. And yes, libraries are used to manage.
Wouldn't need to be solved again.
Wouldn't need to solve all of that. So it does come down to the question between how much control do you want versus how much can you sort of fit it within an existing service, an existing pattern. And I would say for the things that make your app critical to your users, the thing that make it different, the things that the key selling point, that you should, as much as you can, customize it exactly to what makes that your key push. All the stuff like at back ends, like administrative portals, there's effectively off the shelf things that open source, you just plug them straight in. They're not necessarily the prettiest things in the universe, but they do the job. And unless that is your product, then just invest sufficiently so that the admins can do their job and put it all into the features that are going to get you the money. And that's where you balance the custom versus the pulling in the open source, existing libraries.
Right. Which I think leads nicely into our next question that you're going to ask. We're up to number 4 for anyone keeping count. So the next question is, how would your developer determine what's important and what's not? When we talk about software development, we talk about something called an MVP, a minimum viable product. And that's the smallest set of features that you can take to the market that's going to monetize, something that is going to or be exchangeable with your potential users. So you have to determine what that is, because if you go over that, then you're spending money on things that aren't really necessary from day one and might not even be required. So how is your developer going to pull out of you, draw out of you, what is necessary and what's not? What's high priority and what's low priority? What are we going to spend money on the first day, as opposed to considering maybe we do that a year or two down the track? How do we do that, Kane? Because I think we've got that well taped. How do we do that?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about that in a sec. So we do our initial phase, which is designing or the application itself. So the design work, the user experience flows, all these sorts of things. We definitely talk about that. But I think there's kind of a disease in the world of software development, and it's quite a contagious disease as well. So once it starts, it'll start to spread. So all the stakeholders are involved in the project. unless they're
Yeah.
very familiar with software development, they'll all tend to do it. And it's the, wouldn't it be great if? And so as you're designing the product and you're sharing it around and you're getting feedback and so on, and looking at oh, wouldn't it be great if we just had this filter that would filter like on all these like 5 different things, and you could then sort and so we're working with this client, probably one of the first projects I ever worked with, and I learned a lesson from it, which I don't fall for again. So the client wanted, like, they have this table of information, and they wanted all these filters, like excessive numbers of filters and sorts and so on. I asked the question is, how important is this? Like, is this going to make or break this application? The person I'm speaking to, not a software developer. Oh, no, absolutely. We definitely need it. So, okay, fine. I agreed and we implemented it, and, it cost what it cost to implement. This particular product, I was there for the launch, and I was helping. It was part of an event where people would come and test certain products, foods and drink and so on. And this app was recording those tests and recording the information, which was then later used to help on sell and so on. And I was there for 2 days working with the team. And out of those 2 days, these filters that were critically important were not used a single time, at least not to my knowledge.
No one had any interest.
No one had any interest. And and the similar thing happened with Michael, the owner of Reinteractive, where there was this critical feature. The client had to have it. This was back 10 years ago. And Michael, against his better judgment, and had tried to convince the client not to do it, they went ahead and did it. Then he asked the client a year later, how's it going with that feature? And he goes, oh, no one's using it. So,
but they've spent thousands of dollars building it.
So
for no need.
Oh, totally. So I'm really particular when working with clients on a couple of things. One is at the initial stage of design, before you write any software, what are the critical features? And by critical, it's the thing that differentiates your application, that ensures that users use it, get value from it, and they will use that over some other product. Everything else on top is fluff, and you can certainly add those. So I like the Facebook style of development. You start basic. Well, Facebook started basic, right? They just started basic. They got it out there. A single concept that worked, and they got huge numbers of customers. Then slowly they would add additional features as they found that users actually wanted them, and there was enough. Not just one person saying, wouldn't it be great if, or one customer said, it'd be so much easier if I could drag and drop this rather than having to, click 2 buttons. And so I always start with small and critical. And everything else that's fluff, I tell clients, do not deliver that in your first iteration. You can always add features. You can't unadd the cost of features that are never used. So just get it out there, find out. There's this in I think it's Sweden. They have this amazing approach to design and design thinking. So a consultant friend of mine from that area, he was saying that when they build a park for, like they got a playground for the kids. So what they'll do is they'll put the playground, say it's in the middle of the park. They'll put the playground there, but they don't start with any of the paths or any of the roads. It's just the grass and the playground. And over time, the little goat trails get created
tracks,
where everyone actually walks. And then they go in and put the paths where all the goat trails were. Right. And it's where people work. You go to a park and you see these little footsteps off
all the time
because people don't want to use the paths that were there because they're not the ideal path.
But they'll walk where they want to get to. Yeah.
So the same analogy applies with software. Find the goat trails. Find how people want to use the application, and then build the feature, not the other way around.
Right. And then it's very important then, if you're going into the market and you want to build some application, is you need to pick a developer who's actually going to challenge you and say, do you actually need this? Now, if they do that correctly, it's to their detriment. That is, they're going to take less money off of you. to do it, but you'll end up with something that's actually going to be used more. People are going to like it more, and that will be more successful. And that's the point.
Well, we had one before your time, Errol. A client came to us who had this quote to build this mobile app for something on the order of about $600,000. And it wasn't a massive app, and it wasn't a massive client. And they were about to go ahead with it too. And they just said, "Oh, maybe you guys can just have a look at it for us." So I looked at it, went through with the client, found out what was actually critical. We came back with an initial quote of something like 110, or give or take.
Right, big difference.
And just to build, just build the thing, and at least find out if it's valuable. If you spend $600 and it's a bomb, at least if it's 100,000, it's a bomb. That's a lot less expensive bomb. And how much are you willing to invest to see if this is a dud or
how much can you afford to lose?
And they'd worked out they could afford to lose about 130, and we kind of came in around 110. So it kind of worked out well. Right. Well, funnily enough, it turned out the application, no one wanted it. It was a good application. And it was quite cool and quite sort of
the market useful. Didn't exist.
The market didn't exist. And so instead of doing that massive investment and just burning 600K, they burnt what they could to test the app out. And I would have liked to have built something that worked in their market, but it was okay for them. And so that point of whenever a client comes to me with scope, I'm always like, how do you carve this down? Because if it works, then you can build more and you'll make more money, and then you'll use this more anyway in the future, because now you've got an app that has value that you can add features on as you find that users use it. So, it's just a personal principle. I just can't stand people wasting money on software that's useless.
Right. Our integrity is at stake.
Yeah, and I'm not in sales, Errol, so I can push back on that side.
Good opportunity to move on to the next point, which is making sure your team can actually deliver. So if you're talking to a software developer, and again, you might be talking to a salesperson. Now, a salesperson is going to tell you everything is possible. Nothing is impossible. And of course we can deliver. And of course we can start next week, and it's no problem at all. And we'll have it all done by Christmas, no problem at all. But is that actually the truth? So you're going to push through some of that sales talk. And I'm not saying every salesperson does this by any stretch, but it'll creep into every conversation. So find out for sure, can they actually deliver? Do they have people that can start in your application in some period of time? Now, not everybody's going to start next week. That's pretty well known in software, but around a 6-week mark, that's sort of the outside. Can they do it within that? Do they have the team members with the capabilities required? If you ask for AI features, do they have a person or persons in their team who can care for the AI? If you need infrastructure built like AWS or Heroku, are there people within the team that can deliver those things, and so on? I think that's very important. Sometimes a developer might recommend to you features that they don't have the skills for, but they're planning to skill up on, and that's okay. But you don't have to wear their cost of skilling up. Pay for the development, of course, but if it's going to take them twice as long, make sure they are going to cover some of that cost, I guess is the way to put it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think what I like about our process, and the reason we have our process, which is that design stage first. I'll talk a little bit about that, just because it was something we evolved over time and through hard-won experience. And what does it take to actually deliver successful software? So because you are right, there's always this push and pull between sales and delivery. Sales and production. It's in every industry I've ever worked in. Sales will go out there and sell the world, and then production comes and goes, well, we can only do 70% of that, or whatever happens.
Yeah.
Now, we're fortunate with you because you've done software and you've built applications, so you have a good understanding there. But the way we set it up is that during that design process, before we actually quote it, before we get into delivery, it's reviewed by our tech guys and reviewed independently from the sales team, with the idea of, is this something we can technically deliver? Because there is a reputational point for us as well. But I would say, if you're looking at software, and you're looking to build with a company, I wouldn't want to just talk to the sales team. I'd be wanting to talk to the delivery team. Like, who are the guys that are actually going to do it? Because they will, like, delivery guys are very good at telling you what can and can't be done. Like,
right.
to the detriment of the salesperson sometimes.
Right.
They'll irritate the sales.
But it's part and parcel of, like, in the industry, we call it, I guess, a solutions engineer would be the correct term for it. And it's a technical person that jumps onto the call and says, this is what we can deliver and this is why.
That's why I like the design process first. Like, build the design, build the wireframes. It's generally a low cost that you can kind of predict, and you can get a good sense of what the application is going to do. You can work through what are all the critical features. The team can see what's involved. Do they have the technical capabilities to deliver it? Maybe if they don't, or, we run a situation where clients want to do these amazing things, but the cost to do it is well outside of the client's capability in terms of budget. And during that design phase is where we can tweak and adjust and say we can deliver 70% of what you want for like 1/10 of the cost. And most clients, and you find that compromise.
Right. Or if there's some idea that they've had during that process that isn't actually feasible to produce, like maybe it's impossible because the technology doesn't exist, or maybe it's just going to be far too costly. We can put a stop in at that point and say, okay, here's what we can deliver at this cost, or here's what is feasible on your budget. And that tends to work a lot better, rather than finding out once they've planned for it and thought about it and go, okay, we want to build this. No, we can't build it that way.
Yeah, well, one client years ago, something that can be done now that couldn't be done then was the document reading. So this was in the medical space.
Right, OCR.
OCR. So, we were sort of trialing out and prototyping some basic stuff, that sort of design phase, and found pretty quickly that the technology just wasn't there yet. So instead of going off and building it and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, it was a small amount that they could afford to risk, just to test the water, so to speak. And that was fine. Whereas now that exact problem,
solve problem now.
I could totally do that now in like a fraction of the time we were considering back then, with Google Document AI and this sort of thing. That sort of getting right in at the beginning and talking with the tech guys and rolling the sleeves up and seeing what can and can't be done, and building up basic prototypes is a very wise idea. It'll save a ton of wasted resources.
Sounds like a lot of the questions that we're asking here have sort of come back to similar sort of solutions, actually.
Sure.
There's definitely a pattern. All right, next question that we're going to ask. So we've discussed, budgets and can people deliver and how do they deliver. The next thing we want to look at is what is being proposed in terms of the infrastructure. And I've singled this one out in particular because it can be a forgotten part, or one that a client might not think about. And it's one that I know has to be brought up with them and discussed because it's important. So infrastructure is like, the servers that your application sits on. And that would be like AWS or Heroku or Azure, as we mentioned before, making sure that the infrastructure that's proposed is able to handle what is being asked for. Is there enough resources there, and that the security is properly in place, and that the setup means that it can properly scale, is properly backed up, all of that sort of stuff. So these are the things that we need to think about. Anything else you'd add to that in terms of the infrastructure?
It's a two-sided problem, because there's the under provisioning and then there's the over provisioning, and it's finding the correct middle ground. And this is again where the technical guys are a lot better than the sales guys. So I've seen this with other external organizations where they might lock in a client for, say, a 12-month contract on infrastructure. And I've been talking to some sales guys where what probably should have cost for the infrastructure for the entire year of, say, about $15,000. This particular one scenario, I'm definitely not going to mention any names here, but they were proposing to the client $120,000 in infrastructure costs locked in for a year.
Wow.
The salesperson saw an opportunity to make a lot of money, and it was completely like what they were proposing in terms of the resources was well above anything they would probably ever need for their application. So that's it. The infrastructure one and finding is a tough one. And I think that's where you do want to be involved with the tech guys, and potentially you want multiple opinions on infrastructure. I think that's one thing where, unless you trust the company, where just a single view on that could wind you up in a very expensive I've just seen it too often where companies just, particularly these ones where they do have these locked in contracts, they talk to a client who's not technically proficient, doesn't really know what they're buying per se. It's just not there in their wheelhouse. And there's plenty of good salespeople. Some see an opportunity and go way too hard. The under provisioning is not so much of a problem because you can always add more, even if you're in a
actually the ideal actually is better.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're selling in the product and how risky downtime is on the application. So it is a variable calculation. For some applications, kind of while you're starting you launch the app, you're not going to have a lot of users. You can kind of test the waters a little bit downtime here and there, or some slow performance is not a big issue. Unlike, for example, the Australian Census app that couldn't handle any level of DDoS attack.
Remember that
on launch day. Anyhow, I can't even I know how much was invested in that. And how
the thing is, it requires people who actually know what they're talking about. Now, I don't know how that occurred, that it was so woefully under provisioned, but setting up infrastructure requires people that actually know what they're talking about, because having enough resources and making sure the security is properly in place and making sure the deployments of code can happen and making sure that the backups are done and a few other considerations. Like, it takes someone who actually knows what they're talking about. This is not guesswork or something that you can do on the side.
Yeah. And if you're going with a fixed term contract, then you definitely want to have that contract as low as possible with the ability to add service. Like, you can always scale up service, or you can get a bigger database. These are all very easy to do. You start the app, you find it's doing fine, but the traffic's increasing and you've hit 80% capacity. Great, add another server so you don't, hit downtime. Fine. But don't start so high on a fixed contract that you can't come down. If you're on a pay-as-you-go style of infrastructure, like AWS, for example, is pay-as-you-go, that's not such a big deal because you can kind of start a bit higher, see that you're at 30% traffic, and then just scale down next month. It's not a big deal. But
there are advantages and disadvantages to that as well, because you can, if you set up something incorrectly, then you're paying by the minute on AWS. So that can get very expensive very fast. If you leave a few too many instances running, that can be a problem.
It's an art form. Infrastructure is an art form.
Yes.
And it comes down to, again, working with a team that has good infrastructure expertise, because software development and infrastructure are different skills.
Different skills, right.
So, for example, some marketing companies also build software. Doesn't tend to, if it's just a basic marketing site, no, but fine, absolutely go for it.
Right, fine. Yeah, it's a brochure website, yeah.
Fine. But once you're talking about an application, it performs actions and it does things. You want the team that looks after the software to be software specialists. You need a marketing company. If it's a product you're marketing, then you should get that separately. And you need an infrastructure team that knows what they're doing. Now, that can be part of the same software team. Sometimes you have good software teams that kind of outsource their infrastructure to other companies. That's fine too. But you got to check on the infrastructure side.
So these are important things to ask. These are important things to know about. What is your, the development firm that you're talking to? Do they have the infrastructure experts? And what do they recommend if they don't? These are things that need to be known.
Oh, well, we've seen this with a recent new client, Errol, where they had a software built by a company that had no infrastructure team supporting it, like nothing. And so the infrastructure was just sitting there in the ether, hoping that nothing would ever go wrong. And I see Errol's changing. That's fine.
Sorry,
but
go ahead.
That client who we just looked at their infrastructure, and it's a disaster zone. It was just, all it was required was one faulty server. That whole system would have gone down. But they built with a company that had no infrastructure support. I mean, at all. There was no support. And so when you start building software, you have to start thinking like a software company. It's not enough to just go, I'm just going to give the problem to the technical guys, because you don't know if the technical guys have the technical capabilities to do it. And so you can't just push responsibility off to another team. Now, you may have a great team that has all the expertise and they're brilliant and they handle everything. But at the outset, when you're trying to discover, you have to do your own research. The cost of software is too much and too expensive to just kind of throw your hands up and go, too hard, let someone else work it out.
Absolutely. And if something dramatic happens, like a security flaw because the infrastructure wasn't set up correctly, the application is hacked, you lose a bunch of personal information of your clients or your customers. You can blame the agency or the development company all you like, but if your business can't trade because of it, who are you going to blame? So you got to be responsible for that yourself.
That's right. That's right. So you need to have enough understanding, and that does mean rolling your sleeves up and looking and talking and asking questions and researching. And that you ask something you don't understand the answer, make sure you get it clarified. These things are important.
All right. The last point, that was number 6. So our last point, number 7, is you've asked all these questions to your development agency, is don't necessarily just believe what they tell you. So I recommend to people, do your own research, find out for yourself, have a look at what people say about this company online, ask for case studies from them, like get them to send you case studies. Have they built something like this similar before? It might not be exactly the same, but have they solved similar sorts of problems? Ask for referrals if possible. Like, are there people in the industry that will talk to you about that company? But just, find out for yourself. They might answer some of these questions very, very convincingly, but just discover if that's actually true. Another way, as Kane said, would be to talk to other people from the business. Don't just talk to the salesperson or to the owner. Speak to the developer or the project manager or the production manager or somebody like that can, won't be a salesperson, but is going to probably be just a little bit more honest about, can we actually build this or not? That sort of thing. So just have a thought about some of those things as well. Ask for case studies is a good one.
Yeah, you have to. It's an interesting one. The one thing I would say, just on the reverse side of that you don't actually have to worry about as much. The one question you get a lot in software is, have you built this app for someone else before? Like, so for example, maybe they're in the automotive space and it's an e-commerce for selling car parts, and they want to know, well, do you have industry experience in selling car parts? And it's hard to find industry specific software developers of that nature,
and it's not necessary. It's, have you built e-commerce before? That's the question to ask.
It's very rare. So the idea is that as the person, as the customer and your industry, you should know, your industry, your product that you sell. We rely on clients to tell us what is important to them. What you don't have is the technical expertise to execute it. So it's the wrong question to ask, have you worked in this industry necessarily? It's yes. Do you have the technical capability to build this thing? And the development firm should be able to show examples that are similar. Like, yes, e-commerce, but it's not necessarily automotive. It's e-commerce in other areas, but does it do the functionality that you need? Yes, that's the thing to actually look at.
Can you build a secure website? Can you build a mobile app? Can you build an application that's connected to Salesforce? These are the sorts of questions.
Whether it's a car part or whether it's a medical device or this, that, and the other, the technical way of implementing it, that's the thing that's important.
Yeah. All right. That's great. I'm going to just summarize each of the points that we've discussed. And I just want to find out very fast if there's anyone listening live at the moment who has any questions. There might not be. That's okay. So the 7 points, the 7 questions that you're going to ask. Number 1 is get an idea of costs, upfront and ongoing maintenance costs of the application. And don't be naive about what some of these might be. Understand there's a large upfront cost. Understand that there has to be an ongoing, and you can't not do that. Like, it's going to be necessary. What other costs or services are going to be necessary to do your application? I'm talking about things like infrastructure, third party, Stripe, Salesforce, whatever you want to add on the side. What will they cost? Make sure that marketing is included in that. Marketing is not necessarily included as a third party tool to your application, but is a necessary part of it. Number 3 is, how is the development done? Is it off the shelf, or is it custom, or is it somewhere in between? Likelihood is it's going to be somewhere in between, and it should be. That is correct. Number 4, how is the company that you're talking to going to find out exactly what I want? Are they going to push back on things that I ask for because it's the right thing to do, even if it loses them money? Number 5, do they have the ability and the resources to deliver? Do they have the skill set necessary? Can they do what I'm asking them to do? Number 6, what is the approach and the planning for the infrastructure layer? Specific point here, because there's so many considerations in that infrastructure layer: security, deployment, backups, over and under provisioning, all of those sorts of things, highly, highly necessary for many reasons. And the last point is, can they provide case studies, testimonials, referrals, anything that's going to help you to decide, is this the right company? That will give a little bit more information to that. Kane, is there anything that we haven't covered that perhaps we should have, or anything you wanted to say about all this that we didn't say?
I think there's one that's, and this is an experiential point as well, around their contract with the firm that you're going with. And that's around who owns the intellectual property of the application. So if you're building custom software, the expectation, certainly from my perspective, is it's your asset. You should entirely own the intellectual property, except for the open source libraries that are used. But they're
the stuff that can't be sold.
Yeah. So, but then the reason I say that particularly, I've seen too many times where clients have come to us where they've built an app, and maybe it's almost done, and it's just, there's been problems trying to get it delivered, and there's small things left, but the company just can't finish it off. And they've spent all this money and all this time, and then it's like, yeah, we'll be able to help you out. And then you find out that the client does not own the intellectual property to the software, and you're just like, well, who owns the code? And they go, well, it turns out the previous software developer owns the code. And it's like, there's not much I can do for you. And that happens too regularly for my liking. It does. So you've got to be really careful with the commercials on these deals. Like, really check who owns the IP. For custom software, I would expect all the time you own it. The time where you wouldn't own the IP
after the bill's paid.
Well, even some, you own the IP irrespective of whether the bill's paid. So, but the point is, yes, you can pay your bills. But the idea is, the idea is that the code itself, which is your asset, which is stored in an online repository, you should have also control of that code. So that if you don't like the software firm, you can just move it to someone else without any dramas.
Right, turn it off.
Yep, just go, sorry, guys, this is not working. You're done. Next company, good. Here's access, go for it. And I mean, how many times have we had to muck around trying to get access to the code because the existing software company won't release it because they own control and all that kind of jazz? It's like,
it's outrageous. It's quite outrageous.
Yeah. I mean, part of our contracts has always been, we make it really easy to leave you, which forces us, in one respect, to constantly deliver good service. I mean, we want to anyway. But given a client could just pick up and go at any time, we're constantly, every day, we're fighting to deliver and make sure that we keep the client on board, because we know if they're not happy, they're out. There's no lock-in contract here on your software. It's just, we deliver well, or we're going to lose you. And that's how it should be, I think.
It is very surprising how often this comes up in this industry, and it's bizarre because I can't even fathom it in any other industry. It's not like when you imagine if you bought a car and the car dealer said to you, the car's yours, but you've got to leave it here all the time. Like, you can only use our garage. You can't. You can take it out for a spin, but you got to bring it back here at the end of the day. Like, it's a strange concept.
It's nuts, but it happens.
Yeah. It happens far too frequently. Absolutely. All right. So they're the 7 points, and one bonus one, perhaps. I don't see any particular questions coming up here yet. If you have any questions that you want to ask Reinteractive or either of us, feel free to write the question in whatever social media you might be watching this. So whether live or not, we'll see the questions later, and we'll definitely get back to you. Or you can email us as well. So info@reinteractive.com, or just hit the website reinteractive.com, and feel free to ask whatever questions you like. We'll definitely offer our advice to the greatest degree possible. And of course, if you need a software application developer, then give us a call, because we're more than happy to not just answer all of the questions that we just brought up here, but to also be as honest with you about those as possible as well. So anything you want to add to that, Kane?
No, I think we've covered the key points. But the main thing is for anyone looking to do software, I think the key is you've got to get in and look for yourself and investigate yourself. Just don't leave it up to
ask your questions and make sure you get answers to them. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you very much for talking with me today, Kane. And I hope everybody listening got something out of this as well. I know that we did cover quite a lot, but thank you all for listening. Talk to you soon. Bye.